Morning light streamed through the tall glass windows of DreamTech Corp., a building that scraped the clouds and swallowed dreams whole. Inside, hundreds of employees buzzed like bees in perfectly pressed suits, rushing between meetings, coffees, deadlines. And then there was you. An intern with a bright smile, dressed in a simple cream blouse and worn-out sneakers, clutching a tray of coffee cups like your life depended on it. Your ID badge swung around your neck, announcing you to the world, intern. To you, it wasn't just a job. It was a dream come true. Everyone seemed so important, so smart. You wanted them to like you, to think you belonged here too. So when someone said, "Hey, intern, could you grab me a smoothie too?" you lit up and said, "Of course." When another manager waved a thick stack of papers at you, pleading, "Can you drop these off at accounting?" you took them without hesitation, arms already full. Every smile they gave you felt warm. Every "thanks" felt genuine. You never noticed the way their eyes slid away from you once you turned your back. You just thought, "They're my friends now." The elevator dinged. You rushed inside, balancing the heavy tray, sandwich bag, and papers. It was almost empty. Only one man stood inside. He was tall, dressed sharply in a dark tailored suit. One hand in his pocket, the other scrolling casually through his phone. His face was sharply handsome, like he had stepped straight out of a magazine. You didn't know who he was. Maybe a manager? He looked important. Still, manners were manners. You flashed him your brightest smile and chirped, "Good morning." For a moment, he didn't even look up. Did he not hear you? Feeling awkward, you tried again, a little softer. "Good morning." This time he raised his head, and for a second your eyes met. His face was expressionless. Cool. Unreadable. Without a word, he turned his gaze back to his phone. You shrank back immediately, cheeks burning. Maybe he's just busy, you thought hurriedly, trying not to feel too embarrassed. When the elevator opened at the executive floor, he walked out without a glance back. You sighed. So rude. Some people here really think they're royalty, you muttered under your breath, gathering your things. You had no idea that the rude employee you just met was actually Kim Seekjin, the CEO himself. Inside his private office, Jin tossed his phone onto his desk, his mind replaying the brief encounter. Another girl with wide, fake innocent eyes and a too bright smile. He'd seen hundreds. No, thousands. Girls who wore a mask of sweetness, who only cared about his title, his wealth. "Good morning. Good morning." The words echoed annoyingly in his head. He convinced himself he was annoyed. He didn't notice the tiny tug of curiosity scratching at the back of his mind. Because even though he had dismissed you as just another one, something about your eyes didn't sit right. They didn't glitter with greed or calculation. They just glowed. Still, Jin brushed the thought away, pushing it deep down. He had more important things to worry about. His mother was already blowing up his phone with another string of voicemails about upcoming marriage meetings. About Jaiwoo, the daughter of a powerful partner, determined to be his future wife whether he liked it or not. He pressed his temples with his fingers. No distractions, he reminded himself. Yet, unknowingly, he glanced once more toward the elevator in his mind. Toward the girl with the clumsy arms full of coffee, the bright smile, and the belief that everyone was her friend. Meanwhile, you returned to your desk, barely catching your breath before another stack of errands landed in your hands. Someone from the marketing team called out lazily, "Intern! Grab 2 iced coffees for the meeting room, quick!" You nodded eagerly, adjusting your grip on the folders in your arms, and bounced toward the elevator once again. In your mind, you were still smiling. "They're all so kind to me." Across the open workspace, Min-jun, your team manager, leaned back in his chair, spinning a pen between his fingers. His dark hair was slightly tousled, and there was the usual mischievous glint in his eyes, the one that made half the girls in the department roll theirs and half giggle behind their hands. Min-jun was well known for his playful, flirty jokes, dropping compliments as casually as handing out coffee. But everyone knew, behind the teasing smile, he had a sharp mind and a genuinely good heart. He never crossed any lines. Watching you wobble past under the mountain of errands, Min-jun chuckled under his breath. Another one who believes the office is full of angels, he thought, shaking his head. Poor thing. He wasn't interested in you, not yet. After all, you had only joined a month ago. But something about the way you always smiled, always ran to help, even when people clearly used you, poked at his better instincts. Tossing his pen onto the desk, Minjun muttered under his breath, a crooked grin playing on his lips. Looks like I'll have to keep an eye on our little intern, before someone breaks that bubble she's living in. Then, stretching his arms lazily behind his head, he watched as you disappeared into the elevator. He didn't know it yet, but soon enough, protecting you would become something more natural to him than teasing the others. The atmosphere inside Dream Tech Corp's main floor was always electric whenever Kim Seekjin appeared. Even the sound of his footsteps was enough to make half the marketing department suddenly sit straighter, adjusting their makeup, pretending to work harder. Today was no different. The moment Jin stepped out of his private elevator onto the floor, the energy shifted. Subtle at first, a tightening of posture, a fresh coat of lipstick, a conveniently dropped pen. You, oblivious to it all, stood at the far corner of the room, stacking brochures into neat piles for an upcoming event. Meanwhile, closer to Jin's path, the performance began. "Ah!" gasped one of the junior executives, Sora, an infamous attention-seeker, as she accidentally spilled an entire folder of documents right in front of him. Papers fluttered everywhere like snowflakes. "Oh no," she said dramatically, crouching down, carefully angling herself for the best view of her legs in the tight skirt. "Silly me." Jin, without breaking stride, neatly sidestepped the mess without a glance, his long legs moving with cold precision. Another girl, Mina from HR, coincidentally walked past, laughing too loudly into her phone. "Oh my gosh, I just love guys who are hard-working and serious," she said at full volume, sneaking glances at Jin out of the corner of her eye. He ignored her too. Years of dealing with fake smiles, greedy hearts, and rehearsed charm had built walls around him. To Jin, these attempts were predictable and exhausting. His mind had already started to wander elsewhere. Across the room, you were struggling to balance a stack of boxed lunches meant for the client meeting. Someone had casually dumped the responsibility on you, again. You weren't complaining, of course. You never did. You just tightened your grip and smiled, determined to do a good job. Jin's eyes caught the movement. He paused mid-step, watching silently as you wobbled slightly, trying not to drop anything. No one offered to help. In fact, a group nearby even snickered as you stumbled slightly against the desk. "They're just using her," Jin thought sharply, frowning without realizing it. "And she doesn't even notice." It irritated him, more than he wanted to admit. Why? He didn't know. Maybe because your smile wasn't fake like the others. Maybe because, instead of scheming for his attention, you seemed too busy just surviving the chaos around you. He brushed the thought away quickly, adjusting the cuff of his suit. "It's none of my business," he told himself. "I don't care." Yet even as he moved toward the meeting room, his eyes flickered back one last time, to the girl with the soft, determined face and the clumsy arms full of boxes. "At your desk," Minjun noticed too. He whistled lowly and leaned against a nearby filing cabinet, calling out in his usual teasing tone. "Careful there, little intern. You're gonna break your back before you even get promoted." You giggled, grateful for the light-hearted scolding. Minjun easily strode over, plucking half the boxes from your arms without waiting for permission. "Let me help before you face plant into the carpet," he said with a wink. You pouted. "But I can manage." Yeah, superwoman." "Save it for later," Minjun teased, nudging you playfully with his elbow as you both headed toward the conference room. From across the glass walls, Jin noticed the interaction. The way you smiled brightly at Minjun without a hint of flirtation. The way Minjun, despite his playful attitude, didn't look at you like he wanted something from you. He simply helped. Jin's jaw tightened slightly. Strange, he thought. Why does this bother me? He turned away before the thought could linger, focusing on the numbers and reports in front of him. That evening, as the building emptied out and the city lights blinked alive outside the windows, Jin found himself lingering near his office window, arms crossed, lost in thought. Business deals, mergers, contracts, all things he normally obsessed over, floated aimlessly in the back of his mind. Instead, an image kept pushing forward. not of Sora's flashy smiles, or Mina's loud laughter, but of a girl with messy hair, an armful of lunches, and a smile so genuine it almost seemed foolish. He shook his head and turned away sharply. "Get a grip, Jin," he muttered to himself. "She's just another employee." But somehow, deep down, he already knew. You weren't. The third-floor lobby buzzed louder than usual that morning. Whispers floated around the workspace like smoke. Heads turned, heels clicked nervously across the floor. The reason? Jaiwoo, the daughter of DreamTech's biggest overseas partner, rich, spoiled, and fully aware of her influence. She walked into the office as if she already owned it, designer handbag swinging arrogantly at her side. Jaiwoo's sharp heels clacked against the marble floor, announcing her presence louder than any words could. She wore a bright red dress today, dramatic and impossible to ignore, and a smile so fake it barely clung to her lips. The employees scattered as she passed, offering tight, fearful bows. Jaiwoo barely nodded back. Instead, she tossed her hair back and said loudly enough for half the floor to hear, "When I marry Jin Appa, this entire company will be mine anyway. Might as well get used to it, right?" A few girls forced polite laughter. Most just kept their heads low, pretending not to hear. At her words, your head popped up curiously from behind a stack of flyers you were arranging. You blinked, confused. Marry Jin Appa. You hadn't even properly spoken to the CEO beyond that one awkward elevator ride. Surely rumors, you thought. Rich people probably had arranged marriages and weird setups all the time. You shrugged it off and went back to work. Meanwhile, across the floor, Jin heard Jaiwoo's loud boasting through the glass walls of his office. He closed his eyes briefly in irritation. When will she grow up? He thought, rubbing his temple. He had no intention of marrying Jaiwoo. In fact, he could barely tolerate her clinging presence. Later that afternoon, you hurried through the hallway balancing 2 cups of coffee, one for Minjun and one for yourself. You were smiling to yourself, thinking about how Minjun had promised you your first real project soon. Just as you turned the corner. Crash! You collided straight into someone. Hot coffee splashed everywhere, mostly onto the expensive red fabric of Jaiwoo's dress. The entire hallway seemed to freeze. You gasped, bowing repeatedly. "I'm so sorry. I wasn't looking. I'll clean it up right away." You grabbed tissues from your bag, panicking. Jaiwoo stared at the stain in horror, her lips curling into a furious snarl. "You stupid girl," she snapped, shoving your hands away roughly. "Look what you've done. This dress cost more than your entire life." Her voice rose higher, drawing attention from nearby workers. You shrank back, cheeks burning with shame. Jaiwoo pointed a manicured finger at you, venom dripping from her words. "People like you don't belong here. Poor, pathetic interns thinking they're important. I'll have you fired for this." You opened your mouth, stammering an apology, but no words came out. Just then, a sharp voice cut through the tense air. "Enough, Jaiwoo." The crowd parted like the sea. Kim Seekjin stood there, his sharp eyes pinned directly on Jaiwoo. He walked toward you both, his every step measured and commanding. "You have no right to fire my employees," Jin said coldly, voice slicing through the heavy silence. "And as far as I can see, it was you who wasn't watching where you were going." Jaiwoo's mouth fell open. "No, Appa, she." "Apologize," Jin said, his tone leaving no room for argument. You stared at him in disbelief. Everyone stared. Jin rarely got involved in office matters, especially not over minor accidents. Jaiwoo's hands clenched into fists at her sides. Her pride screamed against it. But she forced a stiff smile, gritting her teeth. "I'm sorry," she muttered under her breath. You bowed your head quickly. "It's fine. I'm sorry too." Jin glanced at you briefly, something unreadable flickering in his eyes. Then, without another word, he turned on his heel and disappeared into his office, leaving a stunned hallway behind him. Jaiwoo stood frozen for a moment longer, humiliated. Her fists trembled. He had defended you. You. A nobody. An intern. Someone without money, without status, without anything. Jaiwoo's eyes narrowed dangerously as she watched you scurry away, hugging your coffee-stained sleeves. This isn't over, she thought bitterly. That girl, she must mean something to him. Her blood boiled at the very idea. From that moment on, Jaiwa's hatred for you was born, along with a secret, burning determination. She would not let a nameless intern ruin her plans. Not without a fight. The next morning, the office didn't feel the same. There was an odd, invisible tension hanging in the air. Subtle, but enough that even someone as innocent as you could sense it. People who usually asked you to grab their coffee didn't bother to greet you today. Some whispered quietly when you passed, their eyes flickering with judgment you didn't understand. You tilted your head, confused but determined to stay positive. Maybe they're just busy, you told yourself, hugging your planner closer to your chest. Across the room, sitting on the edge of his desk, Minjun watched the change keenly. His playful smirk faded for a moment as he noticed a small frown forming on your usually bright face. It didn't take a genius to guess why. Whispers had already started floating around. She's trying to seduce the CEO. She spilled coffee just to get noticed. Typical gold digger move. And the source of those poisonous whispers? Jaiwo. Standing by the coffee machine, Jaiwo smiled sweetly at a group of gossiping employees, her voice soft yet deliberate. Poor interns, always dreaming bigger than their worth. The seed was planted. Minjun stood up, casually tossing a file onto his chair. He sauntered over to your desk, hands in pockets, his grin mischievous. Y/N, he called lightly. You looked up, blinking. Yes, Manager Minjun. He leaned down a little too close, his voice playful. Why the long face? Miss your favorite team manager already. You flushed immediately, flapping your hands in protest. And no. I was just... you're... Minjun chuckled, ruffling your hair without warning. You're too easy to tease. You pouted, smoothing your hair down. But despite yourself, you smiled a little. Minjun's eyes softened at that. There's that smile, he thought. Don't let them dull it. He pulled a colorful candy from his pocket and placed it dramatically on your desk. Payment for your hard work, he said, winking. You giggled, forgetting, just for a second, the strange coldness around you. From his office, through the half-open blinds, Jin caught the scene. His pen hovered mid-signature as his gaze lingered, longer than he intended, on you and Minjun. He didn't know why it bothered him. It shouldn't have. After all, Minjun was known for being flirtatious with everyone. It didn't mean anything. Yet, watching you laugh so easily at Minjun's teasing, Jin felt a small, unfamiliar tightness coil in his chest. He frowned and forced himself to look away, signing the document with unnecessary force. It's none of my business, he told himself. She's just another employee. But even as he turned back to work, he couldn't shake the memory of your bright smile, a smile you had never shown him. Later that day, while delivering a stack of reports to the senior manager's room, you accidentally overheard a small group of employees chatting by the water cooler. Come on, one sneered. An intern catching the CEO's attention? It's pathetic. Another laughed. She probably planned the coffee accident. I heard she's been cozying up to Manager Minjun too. You froze, heart sinking. You clutched the papers tighter, fighting the sting in your eyes. You hadn't done anything wrong. You genuinely liked working here. You genuinely liked helping people. You didn't even know how to act charming or cunning like they were accusing you of. You backed away quietly, slipping into an empty corner to breathe. Meanwhile, Jin stood outside the glass hallway, watching you. He saw the way your shoulders drooped, the way you hugged the papers like they were a shield. His fists clenched by his sides. He had heard enough. He knew Jaiwo was behind the sudden change in atmosphere. He knew the employees were too afraid of her influence to resist joining the gossip. And worst of all, he knew he had partly caused this by stepping into the coffee incident yesterday. He hadn't meant to single you out. He just couldn't stand Jaiwo's cruelty. Now you were paying for it. And Jin hated the feeling that curled low in his chest at the sight of you hurting, quietly, alone. That evening, as you prepared to leave, struggling to zip your bag while balancing a stack of old files, you bumped into a tall figure in the lobby. You looked up, startled. It was Jin. He wasn't wearing his usual cold mask today. Instead, he looked serious, thoughtful. For a second, you froze, wondering if you should bow, apologize, or run away. But before you could decide, Jin spoke quietly. "Don't listen to everything you hear." You blinked. Had he heard? But how? You opened your mouth, but he was already walking past you, his figure disappearing into the glass doors, leaving you standing there, heart pounding in your ears. You clutched your bag tighter, not sure whether to feel comforted or even more confused. The next few days passed in a strange, blurry rush. The office atmosphere was still chilly, whispers hadn't died completely, but you kept your head down, focusing only on your work. You refused to let gossip steal your smile. And unknowingly, your resilience caught the attention of someone you least expected. One afternoon, while returning from the copy room with a stack of documents almost taller than your head, you bumped, quite literally, into a wall. Or so you thought. But it wasn't a wall. It was Jin. Papers flew everywhere, scattering like a snowstorm. You gasped, scrambling to gather them, murmuring apologies. "I am sorry, sir. I wasn't looking." Before you could finish, a hand reached out. Jin bent down without a word and began picking up papers with you. You froze. You expected him to walk away coldly. But instead, when your hands accidentally brushed, Jin looked at you, and for the first time, he smiled. Just a small, barely there smile. It wasn't mocking. It wasn't forced. It was almost soft. You stared at him, stunned. Your heart skipped a confused beat. And just like that, he stood, handed you the neatly stacked papers, and walked away, as if nothing unusual had happened. You blinked after him, your mind blank. Across the hall, Minjun saw the whole scene unfold. He whistled lowly to himself. Sliding over to your desk later, he leaned close and teased. "Oh ho! Since when did Mr. Iceberg start smiling at little interns?" You shook your head frantically. "It was nothing. He was just being polite." Minjun chuckled, ruffling your hair again. Right. Polite. Sure." He winked and added playfully, "Better be careful, Y/N. Someone might just steal your innocent little heart." You pouted, swatting his hand away. "Stop teasing me, Manager Minjun." But your cheeks burned. Deep down, you wondered too. Was it really nothing? Unfortunately, not everyone missed the tiny change. Standing near the elevator, Jaiwoo watched it all with narrowed eyes. Her nails dug into her designer purse. That BTCH. Asterisk. She's trying to climb up by acting innocent. How dare she? Her mind raced. She had to act, fast, before things spiraled further. With a sickly sweet smile, she pulled out her phone. It was time to set a new plan into motion. The next morning, you were summoned unexpectedly to the meeting room. You entered nervously, clutching your notepad. Inside were Jin, several senior managers, and Minjun, giving you a cheeky thumbs up from his seat. You gulped. Jin, without even glancing at you directly, spoke coolly. "Starting today, you will assist with the Rivera project." Your eyes widened. The Rivera project was one of the biggest ongoing deals in the company. Handling even a small part of it was a huge honor and responsibility. Jin continued, voice emotionless. "You'll report directly to me for the next 2 weeks." You almost dropped your notepad. Directly to the CEO. Your head spun. The managers murmured in approval. Minjun gave you an exaggerated good luck gesture behind Jin's back, making you almost laugh. You bowed deeply. Thank you for the opportunity, sir. I won't disappoint you." Jin finally looked at you properly, and once again, a small, quick smile flickered across his face. Your heart jumped without permission. Outside the meeting room, Jaiwoo stood hidden behind a pillar. Her lips twisted into a cruel smirk. So she wants to work closely with Jin now? Fine. Let's see how long she survives. Her next plan was already forming. And this time, she wouldn't play nice. The first day working on the Rivera project felt like being tossed into the deep end. Spreadsheets, reports, client presentations, the workload was overwhelming. You weren't even sure if you were breathing properly. And right in the center of it all was Kim Seokjin, Jin. Precise. Focused. Effortlessly brilliant. He barely spoke unless necessary, issuing instructions in a low, steady voice. At first, you thought he was irritated by your presence. But by the third meeting, you noticed something strange. Whenever you struggled with a task, fumbling through thick technical documents or staring hopelessly at confusing financial terms, Jin would subtly adjust your notes when no one was looking. He never explained out loud, never embarrassed you. Just small corrections, so seamless, so natural, as if silently telling you, "You're not alone." During a late evening work session, you sat at the conference table, typing furiously on your laptop, stifling yawns. A cup of coffee suddenly slid in front of you. You looked up, startled. It was Jin. No words, just a small tilt of his head, as if saying, "Take it." You grabbed the cup with both hands, bowing your head. "Tea, thank you, sir," you whispered. For a second, you could have sworn Jin's lips twitched, almost like he was suppressing a laugh. Meanwhile, outside the glass conference room, Jaiwoo watched the scene unfold. Her blood boiled. Coffee. Smiles. Next, will he start holding her hand? She stormed away, heels clicking furiously against the floor. She needed to act. The next morning, a mysterious urgent email arrived in Jin's inbox. It accused you, the innocent intern, of leaking confidential Rivera project documents to an outside party. The evidence? A series of doctored screenshots showing you emailing files to an unknown contact. Of course, you knew nothing about it. You were setting up the coffee machine when you were abruptly called to the CEO's office. Your heart pounded. The entire office watched as you nervously stepped inside. Jin sat behind his massive mahogany desk, unreadable as ever. Minjun was there too, arms crossed, watching you closely. You stood trembling, confused and scared. Jin tapped his fingers against the desk once, then said coolly, "Did you send any project files outside the company?" You gasped. "And no. I swear, sir. I would never." Before you could explain further, Minjun chimed in. "Boss, I checked her activity logs myself. She didn't send anything. Those screenshots are fake." You blinked at Minjun in shock. He winked subtly at you, mouthing, "Relax." Jin leaned back in his chair, eyes sharp. He hadn't believed the accusation either. But he needed to confirm. After a long pause, he finally spoke. "Then someone is trying to frame you." Your knees almost gave out from relief. Jin added, voice a notch softer, "You're not suspended. Keep working. And stay close to manager Minjun for now." You bowed deeply, tears stinging your eyes, but not from sadness. From gratitude. He trusted you. Without hesitation. Back at your desk, you found Minjun waiting with his usual playful grin. He handed you a lollipop. "You survived your first scandal, little intern," he teased. You laughed shakily, taking the candy with both hands. "Thank you, manager Minjun." Minjun just ruffled your hair again, softer this time. "No need to thank me. Just be careful. Not everyone smiles at you because they like you." You nodded solemnly. But deep inside, a small part of you already knew. Some smiles were different. Far away, Jaiwoo seethed. Her plan had failed. Miserably. And worst of all, Jin had defended you. Publicly. Her jealousy burned brighter. This wasn't over. Not even close. Later that evening, as you were leaving the building, you bumped into Jin near the parking lot. He was on his phone but paused when he saw you. For a brief second, he just stared at you. And then, so naturally it almost hurt, he smiled. A soft, secret smile just for you. Your heart leapt painfully against your ribs. You bowed quickly, cheeks flaming, and rushed away. Behind you, Jin chuckled under his breath, surprising even himself. He wasn't supposed to care. He wasn't supposed to notice. But somehow, you were changing everything. And neither of you even realized it yet.